Something I love to do in the winter months when sunlight is scarce and it's easy to feel run down is make use of what the forest provides. I gather needles from many types of coniferous trees for tea. I savor the minty berries and the leaves of the wintergreen plant. And when I can find it, I make ample use of the chaga mushroom, which grows on birch trees in the northern hemisphere. There's something so soothing about nursing the essence of the forest on a cold winter day, especially after months of difficult weather. It makes me feel strong and alive during a time of year that's prone to making me feel tired, worn down, or sick. I'll talk about pine needle tea first, and we'll also show you the kind of beautiful tea the chaga mushroom makes, reminiscent of a woody, earthy tasting coffee. And then I will talk about one of my favorite forest snacks, wintergreen. One of my favorite things in the world is the smell of a pine forest on a warm summer day. There's absolutely nothing like it. In the winter, I substitute this pleasure of mine with pine needle tea instead. It was made traditionally by the people who lived on this land first, and subsequently European settlers. It was known to cure scurvy thanks to its extremely high vitamin C content. Pine needle tea has many other benefits as well, such as anti-cancer and antiseptic properties, antioxidants, and components that strengthen the cardiovascular and immune systems, just to name a few. I don't want to bore you too much. It is also an expectorant, which means it helps expel mucus from the respiratory system. I love this since I've had pneumonia twice, and after the second time, my lungs have never really cleared out properly, so I'm always looking for ways to naturally alleviate these symptoms that actually work. When harvesting material to brew for tea, make sure to use a sharp tool so you're making clean cuts on the tree. There is reportedly more vitamin C content in the older needles of the tree, but the trade-off for this is a stronger, more turpentine taste, which may not be very pleasant if you don't sweeten it. I've found that the younger, newer growth doesn't create such a strong flavor, so if you're making it for the first time, you might prefer to take the newer growth. You can tell what growth is newer versus older just by where the needles sit on the branch. The closer they are to the trunk of the tree, the older the needles will be, and the closer they are to the end of the branch, the newer and younger they will be. To make this tea, the most important thing is to not boil it, as this will destroy the vitamin content within it. You will be bringing the water in your pot or pan to a boil, but then reducing it to a simmering heat while you add the pine needles. So bring 3 cups of water to a boil, add a half a cup of pine needles or whatever mixture of needles you've collected, which I will talk about next, and simmer it for 20 minutes with the lid on. The pine I'm using is eastern white pine, which has long, soft bunches of 5 needles. I've discovered that I enjoy adding needles from other coniferous trees such as balsam fir, white spruce, and eastern hemlock. If you're wanting to keep it simple but still add some extra flavor, I recommend adding at least a little bit of balsam fir with the pine needles. I find that the balsam fir needles add a very sweet taste and almost a little bit more of a pine taste than the pine needles themselves. I also include the leaves of wintergreen since it adds a sweet, minty flavor. My favorite combination is this beautiful trifecta of pine needles, balsam fir tips, and wintergreen leaves. And on that note, let me show you one of my favorite things to find in the winter forest. The berries of wintergreen are best in the fall when they're fresh, but they do remain on the plant for much of the winter if you can get to them before the birds and the squirrels. Biting into one of these is like chewing on a styrofoamy piece of gum. The flavor is surprisingly similar. You can chew the leaves as well, which are also very tasty. I said that I add the leaves into my pine needle tea, but you can brew a wintergreen tea entirely on its own. While I was researching wintergreen, I saw a number of people online, foragers and herbalists alike, compare it to the lingonberry, a plant producing similar looking berries that grows in Northern Europe. Note, I thought that it was only in the Scandinavian areas of Europe, but I discovered that lingonberry also grows in Northern Canada. Oh, I'm so unreasonably excited about this. I almost want to backpack all the way up to the Yukon or Nunavut or the Northwest Territories or whatever. I need to find this plant. What I find amazing about wintergreen is that it possesses strong anti-inflammatory properties. It contains methyl salicylate, a compound very close to the main ingredient in aspirin. It can be used to make topical treatments for muscular and rheumatic pain, and other folk recipes include uses for easing colds, throat pain, rheumatism, tooth decay, and general aches and pains. When I harvest wintergreen, as with everything, I try to do my best to do it mindfully. I only take berries from a plant that has at least 2, and I only pick leaves from plants with at least 3 leaves. I also try not to over-harvest any one particular patch of wintergreen. So if it means I have to do a little bit of walking and traveling in between patches, then I do that just so I don't deplete an entire patch all on its own. Now on to Chaga Tea. On days that are particularly cold and miserable, I love making Chaga Tea because of its strong, earthy flavor. I've heard and read about many reported health benefits of this mushroom, but I decided to look to Google Scholar to find some concrete evidence. Not that I disbelieve its inherent value and long history of being used by indigenous peoples all over the Northern Hemisphere. I actually believe in this wholeheartedly, but I get a little bit skeptical with things that have become a bandwagon trend. So I found a paper that I really liked, which talks about the many compounds found in chaga mushroom within a scientific research setting, and how they are responsible for providing the reported health benefits so many people online talk about. I will link that in the description below if you're curious. Chaga tea has historically been used for treating so many different conditions I lost count when I was researching. Extracts of this mushroom created on a commercial level have been used to treat liver and skin diseases, diabetes and hyperglycemia, digestive issues, tuberculosis, and even some types of cancer, just to name a few. Chaga reportedly has the highest antioxidant potency score out of any superfood we know of. It can also be used as an adaptogen, which means that it aids your body in coping with stress, whether it's mental, physical, or emotional. I always keep this in mind whenever I'm making this tea because I'm someone who deals with PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome, a hormonal condition that is closely linked to chronic stress. Managing stress and being able to physiologically cope with it in a healthy way is crucial in healing from this condition, so I will take all the help I can get. I don't harvest much of this mushroom as it can be difficult to find. I only harvest a portion of large chunk, always leaving something behind, and I don't really touch anything that isn't larger than my fist. Most of the chaga I found in this area isn't large to begin with, but when I was working in British Columbia a few years ago for a logging company, I often found chaga growing on the side of a birch tree that would be the size of me if I curled up in a ball and stuck myself to the side of the tree. Because chaga mushroom can sell for high prices in health food stores, in some areas this resource has been abused and overharvested, which unfortunately isn't surprising. When I harvest chaga, I often break it into smaller chunks to aid in the drying process, and I let it dry for at least a month until the pieces are light and brittle and they snap apart easily. What I do to make this tea is take 4 or 5 1-inch chunks of the mushroom and simmer it in just over a liter of water for half an hour. You want to make sure you don't boil this tea again, only simmer it. There are a ton of recipes online with specific mushroom to water ratios, but I found many of them didn't have enough water for my liking, so I make mine by eyeballing it. The tea will come out almost black with less water, making a more concentrated tea, so I add enough water to the point where I can see the color of the tea is just barely starting to become diluted. I drink it unsweetened as I really like how it tastes. I could compare it to oolong tea in that it has a woody flavor, but chaga tastes richer and more earthy than oolong. It's also been used historically as a substitute for coffee because of its taste. I should mention that you can make this tea by grinding it into a powder and brewing it as more of an instant tea in a tea bag, but I like doing it this way because you can actually freeze the chunks of the mushroom, reusing them a few times until the water stops changing color. One last really cool tidbit. Chaga can also be used as a tinder fungus. If you light it, it will hold an ember within the mushroom. Indigenous peoples all across the northern hemisphere also used this to carry fire with them as they traveled, or used it in its powdered form as an instant fire starter. So now that you've seen a few of the possibilities of forest foraging in the winter time, next time you're out in the woods somewhere, I invite you to pick a few handfuls of pine needles, keep your eyes on the forest floor for the round, glossy leaves of wintergreen, and make sure you double take every birch tree you see for the black, knobby looking chaga mushroom. And please remember to harvest with respect.